Hello and welcome back to Module 3 of the Fit4DigiLinE training course. This is the third and final part of our module in which we are going to talk about podcasts. Podcasts are rather new in the learning scenario, but they can be very useful for the learners. Before we proceed, let's make sure we are on the same page. What is a podcast? Well, a podcast is a collection or series of digital audio files that are available for downloading or listening via the internet. Each individual audio recording is known as a podcast episode, and one podcast can consist of many episodes that are connected either within the same topic or within a common theme. Podcasts are typically hosted by a person or by some people who lead a conversation, share stories, or report the news. These are just a few examples of podcasts that could be useful while learning a new language. As you can see in here, we have selected several resources in different languages that are divided per level. So, how can such a tool be useful to the language learning process? First of all, for many people, listening might be more attractive and less tedious than reading. Reading indeed requires the physical and mental focus of the learner, while listening might be less training for them. Secondly, in podcasts created by native speakers, hearing the sound of a language in a fluent and clear speech might help the learner practicing the language's natural flow. A great advantage of a podcast is that the learner can actually control the audio speed, and if needed, they can also pause the episode. And then, usually the learner can also download the transcripts that could be useful for them to better understand the text they are listening to. Another pro of the podcast is that it doesn't require 100% of the learner's attention. Indeed, the students could also listen to the audio while doing other things. And therefore, this is a great way for them to combine leisure time with language learning. And finally, as it is the case with audio, podcasts are also a useful and accessible tool, especially for visually impaired people or for those people with reading or learning disabilities. Now that we have talked about the various benefits of a podcast, let's see together how we could use them with our students. The simplest way is, of course, to play podcasts directly in the classroom. There are online several platforms that allows you to download or stream the podcasts, and the most popular ones are Spotify, Google Podcasts, or Audible. Podcasts can also be played at home by the learners. In this way, following the teacher's recommendations, students could practice the language outside the classroom in a productive and effective way. Lastly, making a podcast could become a classroom activity. Although more complex and time-consuming for learners, developing the content, speaking, and recording them might become an entertaining experience. Here we can see some of the most commonly used platforms where you can find many topics for every need and taste. Of course, learning activities aren't only limited to that. Here we can see a few examples of fun and interactive activities we could do with our students starting from a podcast. For example, we could create a listening comprehension exercise through questionnaires, or we could ask our students to summarize the main concepts they understood from the episode, or we could ask them to create a glossary of the new terms, and so much more. In case making a podcast sounds like an interesting learning activity for you, let's see how it should be done. First of all, Start by identifying your topic and your goals. What will you talk about? What is the purpose of your podcast? Secondly, develop the format. Decide how many podcast episodes you would like to produce and roughly how long each episode should be. Next, write a script or an outline. This could be as loose or strict as you want, depending on how much you want to improvise around the topic while creating the podcast. It will be really helpful for speech production practice to have the learners talk about the topic in the target language. Once your content is ready, gather the necessary equipment and record your podcast. Once you're done, we do suggest you to edit the audio in order to cut or rearrange some parts or in order to improve sound quality. Single programs like Audacity could be used to this end. And if you remember, Audacity was presented in part 2 of this learning module. At the very end, if you wish to publish the end result, you can upload your audio files to a podcast hosting service like the ones we shared earlier. And this is the end of Module 3. In the next module, we are going to discover together how to use games for learning purposes. Are you ready?